China has a new kryptonite, the Quad. Not the one you're thinking about, not Japan, India, US and Australia. This is a new grouping. It's called the West Asian Quad. What's different about this new group? Two big things: members and area of operation. These are the members of the West Asian Quad: India, US, Israel and the United Arab Emirates. The first Quad focuses on the Indo-Pacific. This one, the new one, focuses on West Asia. I would say an equally volatile region. Two things are happening here. One, a setback to China. West Asia was the next frontier in the Belt and Road. This new Quad could stop China's advance there. And two, new opportunities for India. We're talking both strategic and financial. India set the ball rolling. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar is on a 5-day visit to Israel. On Monday, he joined a virtual summit of the West Asian Quad. He was joined by Yair Lapid, Israel's foreign minister, Antony Blinken, US Secretary of State, and Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the UAE's foreign minister. They got some good press. The new Quad, the Mid-East Quad, the West Asian Quad, all sorts of names are popping up. But is there substance to this new group? Their first meeting had 4 major outcomes. Number one, they agreed to establish an international forum for economic cooperation. Number two, they set the agenda: infrastructure, transport, maritime security and trade. That's what they'll focus on. Number three, they agreed to appoint officials for a joint working group. And number four, a proposed in-person meeting at the Dubai Expo. It could happen in the next few months. So 4 decisions from their first meeting. It's not a bad start, we say. But the key is to build on this, to turn consensus into concrete actions. And if that happens, the West Asian Quad could become China's kryptonite, and I will tell you how. For the longest time, America was the undisputed power in West Asia. That changed in the last decade. First Barack Obama, then Donald Trump. They scaled back American presence in the region, and this has created a political and economic vacuum. Enter China. West Asia wanted to sell oil, and China obliged. 40% of China's crude imports are from West Asia. As always, Chinese money ends up as Chinese leverage. So they signed a series of agreements with West Asian countries. Take a look. Comprehensive strategic partnerships with Saudi Arabia, Egypt and the UAE. A 25-year cooperation plan with Iran. 5G projects in Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, plus a handful of projects in Israel, including a shipping port in Haifa and a light railway line in Tel Aviv. In total, China has invested around $224 billion in 15 West Asian countries. And these investments have come in the last 2 decades, less than that, last 15 years more so. Except for Iran, these are traditional American allies. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, they're American allies, and they were signing deal after deal with China. So America's motive is pretty clear here: draw the Arab world away from Beijing. How will they do that? With the Abraham Accords, quite literally, the trump card. Israel's big focus is Arab recognition. Not even Chinese money can distract them. The US is using this leverage to pull Israel away from Beijing. What about the UAE? What's in it for them? A lot of economic opportunities. The UAE and Israel are expanding their business ties. A Quad format helps oil the levers. For instance, Israel brings cutting-edge technology. America brings the money. It works for the UAE. Now, where does India figure in this equation, in this new Quad? For starters, all 3 nations are close Indian partners: the US, the UAE and Israel. Plus, India is a staunch supporter of the Abraham Accords. It's quite similar to India's own policy, de-hyphenation, which basically means deal with Israel and Palestine separately. This Quad could be India's window to West Asia. We are talking about joint projects, people-to-people exchanges, more than we already have. Tourism, a multitude of opportunities. I know it sounds too good to be true, so let me also tell you the downside of this. What happens to Iran, for instance? India has had good relations with Tehran for a very long time, but none of the others do. Not the US, definitely not Israel. This new Quad will no doubt upset Iran. And it comes at a bad time in India-Iran ties. There is trouble brewing over an Iranian oil field. It's called the Farzad B. India has a 40% stake in this oil field. Under the initial agreement, the profits would be split 70-30. 30% of it going to India. But Iran is now backing out. Their government says this deal will not benefit them in 30 years. Well, this may not be the end of India-Iran ties, but it's definitely a worrying pattern. That's where the West Asian Quad comes in, an additional foothold for India in the region. It's an interesting experiment, really. It's a new headache for China, certainly. But a lot depends on what happens next. Can the US bring Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords? Can Joe Biden keep his focus on both West Asia and the Indo-Pacific? Or will he cut and run, like he did in Afghanistan? WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.